if the husband had someone to hold him accountable to growing and being a better person, rather than having a wife who acts as a slave to cater to his every whim, who creates a selfish monster. I want to understand what you say about marriage. Have we twisted your words and what you meant about how to have a good marriage? I believe that it has been made into an idol, and so many lives are sacrificed on that idol.
Wow. Elizabeth, can I interject for a minute? I just want to, that is like, those are like $1 million questions for God.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Eden Podcast, where we true the verse of Genesis 3:16, and we discover that God didn't curse Eve or Adam or limit woman in any way.
And I'm Bruce C.E. Fleming, Executive Director of the True 316 Foundation. Our website is true316.com. That's TRU316.com. And we're the home of the Eden Podcast. Christy Goodham is our co-host today. Hi, daughter. And
Hi, Dad.
Would you take over and take us into the show, please?
Yeah, I'd love to. We're happy to have you with us, Elizabeth Heger. And I just want to introduce you to our listeners. So
I'm really happy to be here. So
thank you. Thanks for taking time to do that. Well, you are a nurse, a wife, and a mother of a blended family with 9 children, right?
Yes.
That's got to be fun.
It is fun.
And you say you grew up in a, quote, Christian home, but it had in a tiny town in Northwest Montana, but your family was very dysfunctional, and and sadly, your home church taught that men are called to rule in their homes, which was very destructive to you all. And you carried your mother's extreme subservience into your first 2 marriages until God revealed truth to you and rescued you, you say, in 2020. So yeah, what a journey. And now since then, you've built your own house as a single mom of 6 kids in 2021. That I'm sure we got a lot we could cover today. God's provided everything you've needed. And even though you took on an impossible task with God, you were able to succeed. And you've now remarried in 2022?
Yes. Yep. Last year.
Yeah. And now you're married to a wonderful man and have been able to bring your stepmothering to 3 wonderful children. You have 6 children from prior marriages. So you're very passionate about helping women see their true value in God's eyes and escaping abuse.
Yes. Very passionate about it.
Yeah.
So I guess I could just kind of start my story. Grew up in a quote unquote Christian family. We went to church every single Sunday. I remember like saying the sinner's prayer when I was like 4 years old, and just like always really wanting to have a relationship with God. But the church that I grew up in, it seemed more like, you know, Jesus saved you, but then you just had to do this whole long list of do's and don'ts, and it was all on you to do that. And so I always looked at Christianity as just like a list of rules and a list of things to do, and it wasn't really the relationship part for me. My dad, this is the part of my story that I feel is sad, is that my dad could have been a really good man, but because he was told that he should get his way, there was no accountability for him. And my mom did everything he told her to do. And when my parents got divorced after being married for 20 years, my mom would go get coffee with me, and she couldn't even decide what kind of coffee to order. So she would just order whatever I ordered because she'd been told what to do her entire marriage.
Wow.
So she was basically left as a shell of a person. And so I'm not really sure, like, it's just the hand of God that rescued me through all of that. I started seeing issues like in my parents' marriage and just in everything when I was a teenager, and then kind of rebelled during that time. And so was kind of like, I don't know about this whole Christian thing, and kind of just walked away from God. And I met a guy when I was 17 who was very good looking and very charming, and seemed very wonderful. And I grew up in that purity culture. So it was always like, you know, you save yourself till marriage, even though I wasn't walking that. And so I ended up losing my virginity to him. We'd never had any conversations about sex. And within a month I was pregnant. And he asked me to marry him. And so I married him. The marriage was horrific. It was a disaster. He wasn't a believer. He The first week of our marriage, I was pregnant, and he had my car because he didn't have his own car, and he left me at home while he was at work, and then he stayed out drinking 3 nights, just partying and hanging out with friends. And so my marriage was horrific. I found out later that he cheated on me with multiple people, and I went to my pastor and his wife, and I was just like, what do I do? Like, I don't know what to do. I can't live like this anymore. And they just, and I even asked I remember calling my pastor's wife and being like, I'd been in women's Bible studies where they were just talking about, your whole role as a woman is to be a submissive wife and love your husband and all this stuff. And that's all I had ever been told my whole life. God requires this. And I actually called my pastor's wife and I was like, my husband is cheating on me. I know it. He had given me a couple of STDs, and I said, do I still have to sleep with him? And she quoted that verse about not depriving your spouse and twisted it and told me, I don't think I could do this, but God requires you to continue having sex with your husband. And I was devastated because I was like, I can't even protect myself. And I remember asking them, like, what if I had 2 small children at the time. I was like, what if I end up with HIV or AIDS and my children don't have a mother? Like, what am I supposed to do? And they were just like, just keep loving him, keep submitting to him, just do whatever he tells you to, as long as it's not sin. That's what God requires. And if you just pray hard enough and do enough, that God will fix your marriage. And then it'll be this miracle story. And so I really believed that. And I did everything that I could. And then we separated for a period of time because I had gotten sick, had 2 little ones. I had a baby and a little one at home, and he was sick. And my baby wasn't sick, but I was sick. And I called him at work and I said, can you please come home? I need your help. I need you to help me. I'm sick and the babies are sick. And he was just like, well, I don't know what you expect me to do about it. And he stayed out all night drinking, went to his mom's. And then the next day I called him and I just said, can you please help me? And he was like, I'm going to go fishing with my brother. Like, I don't know what I can do to help you anyway. So I'm going fishing with my brother. And my mom had kept telling me, like, God hates divorce. God hates divorce. You can't divorce him. You made a choice. You got to stick it out no matter what. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to survive this. I was like 95 pounds because I didn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I cried myself to sleep every night. And so I was just like, I can't live like this anymore. So we were separated for about, I think, 8 months. And during that time, I went and got on welfare, and I had dropped out of high school. I guess that's even more of a crazy story, but I'll leave that out. I dropped out of high school, and then they helped me get my GED. And so we were separated. Then he lost his driver's license because he got a DUI. And so he came back and was like, I'm so sorry, and we're going to work this out. And I really didn't want to, but I felt like I didn't have a choice. And so, because everybody kept telling me, you just got to make it work. And so we got back together, and I immediately got pregnant with our 3rd baby. Well, things did not go well. And he ended up leaving me for another woman that he worked with. When I was 7 months pregnant with our 3rd baby, he just left. He was just done. And I was devastated because I'd had all these people telling me that if I just tried hard enough, and if I just prayed enough, and if I just did enough, that God would be happy with me and he would bless me and fix my marriage. And he did not. And I remember being so angry with him and just being like, why? I remember like being in my car and just screaming, like, why? I've done everything. I've almost killed myself to do what you told me to do. And I found my prayer journal since then. It's crazy. I think that'll end up being in my book. But anyway, so I walked away from my faith for a couple of years. I was just like,
That's understandable.
This doesn't work. This is crazy. And so, but during that time, like, God was just so kind to me. And I remember just struggling and being like, I know I want to have a relationship with God, And at the time I was doing some partying, and, you know, I was smoking, and I was like, I was trying to quit smoking. I was trying to do all these things. And I remember going to church one Sunday, and I hadn't gone to church in a long time. I went to a church where well, during this time, I'm going to nursing school with 3 little kids. So that's another little part of my story. But I was just like, I went to this church. It was nothing like I'd ever seen before. It was like in a warehouse building. It was totally different. And I'm like, this is really interesting. And when I drove home from church that day, the song, I think it's Casting Crowns, Does Anybody Hear Her? That came on the radio, and I was just like bawling. And I remember like trying really hard. I'm going to be a good Christian now. And then I would fail. And I was trying to quit smoking, and I kept like not being able to. And I remember one day just like falling on my face before God and just being like, I can't fix me. I've tried to fix me. I can't do this. I need you to help me because I can't do it. And so I decided to quit trying so hard. And I was just like, God, I'm going to start writing in a prayer journal, and I'm going to start reading my Bible, and I need you to fix me because I can't do it. And that was a huge turning point for my life, just a huge turning point. And so after that, like, I finished nursing school. There's a bunch of miracles in that too, because it was wild working weekends and 3 little kids, and I didn't have any support, no child support. But God provided everything I needed through that. And then
that, I'm sure, like you say, Elizabeth, I'm sure that in and of itself would be a whole
it's a
nother
book.
story of how God provided. Yeah. And you said, you
Yes.
were telling us off air before we started that you're working on writing a book with all these stories in it, because it
Yes.
sounds like you've just got thing after thing that points to that
Yes.
thread, that like common theme thread in your life of God stepping in, even when you didn't see it. Like in that first marriage, you couldn't see it. You tried to do what you thought God wanted you and what others were telling you God wanted you to do. And despite it not working the way you expected, now I'm sure you can look back and see where God was through all
Yes,
of that.
I see his fingerprints all over my entire life. And even when I didn't deserve it, he was so gracious and kind to me. And I want other people to know that's what Christianity really is. It's not like all this legalism, and it's not all these rules. It's having a relationship with God that is real, and having a God who loves you, and just, he cares so much about the minute little tiny things that it's just amazing.
Yeah. I'm going to ask at this point, unless Dad, you have an idea and you want to interject with the direction to go. Oh, you're muted, Dad. Can't hear you. But I'll there you go.
Please go. Please do. It's all yours.
Okay. All right. Elizabeth, I would love to hear, because I have a feeling there's some gems in this part of your story. Would you jump ahead and take us to how your story intersects with Truth 316, the values of the Eden podcast? A lot of our listeners who will be listening to this episode have heard other episodes, so they know what we stand for, and some may not. But tell us, what is it about the message that God made, that in Genesis, God didn't limit the woman in any way, his heart of tenderness toward her and how he speaks to her after they've eaten the fruit. Some of the messages we believe that are a theme throughout the Bible of God's tenderness toward women and encouragement of women. Can you tell us more about how that intersects with who you are today and how you're living today?
Yes, absolutely. So I grew up, my dad was very misogynistic, like hated women. And somehow I was his favorite. And I've always questioned that, because I only have one brother, and I always wondered why I was the favorite. I'm a woman. Like, why would I be the favorite? Well, I've realized recently, like, I was always so adoring of my dad, and he could do no wrong in my eyes. And so I just thought the world of him, and I was always a daddy's girl. And my brother, when he would see things, he would stand up for whatever. And my dad hated that. And so, I've always been taught, like, women are more easily deceived, like all of the things. I am pretty sure, I was trying to find it this morning, but I'm pretty sure I wrote a Facebook post maybe 10 years ago. And at the time I was very involved in politics, and I remember writing something saying the downfall of our country in America was because women were given the right to vote. That's what I believed. That's how like
Wow.
ingrained that was for me. And
Wow.
so I believed that until so
Wow.
when I went through my divorce, so my second marriage, married this guy who basically mirrored me. And he claimed to have a relationship with God, but what he did through our marriage was to use the Bible to control me and abuse me. And always tell me I needed to be more loving and submissive. I had to do all these things because the Bible said I had to. And I was never allowed to have a disagreement. Like I couldn't disagree with him on any of his beliefs, nothing. And so during that period of my life, like I married him thinking I was marrying somebody who really loved God and that we would be able to live life together serving God. And then he basically like used scripture to keep me from doing what God was calling me to do.
Wow.
So
sounds like a recipe for disaster.
it was. And so so when we were married for 10 years, I started begging God to help me fix my marriage because I almost walked away from my faith again because I just couldn't even talk about the Bible with my husband, or he would tell me I was wrong. And he'd tell me all the time, like, the God you believe in isn't the real God. Like, he speaks to you through me, and just a lot of crazy stuff. And so I started crying out to God. Like, we had 3 more children. So I had 3 from my first marriage. My second husband adopted my 3 younger kids, or my 3 older kids. And then we had 3 girls together. And I was like, I can't go through another divorce. Like, people give me grace for going through the first one because he left me, but I can't go through another divorce. And I was just like, there's no way I can do this for another 10 years. And I was crying out to God, please help me, help me, help me. And I was like, fix me because I'm not a good enough wife, fix my marriage, like all of these things. And instead, God was so kind in showing me truth. And that's a whole nother story that will be part of the book. But basically, he guided me to this support group online of women, Christian women who were in abuse. And that's when I started seeing the truth. I read, maybe I'll skip this part. So I was basically asking God to help me, show me truth. I've written in my prayer journal, like not every day, but I've written pretty frequently. And I'll just read a little. I printed this off. And this was before I found your podcast. And I was like, I think it was in May of 2020 or something. And I said, I keep thinking about the curse in Genesis, where it says the woman's desire will be for her husband and he will rule over her. Why does the church perpetrate that? Not only do they allow abuse, they condone it by telling the woman that the husband is to rule over her. I think that is a lie. What if we don't believe that and push that in the church? How would it affect someone or both people in the marriage, the children? Wouldn't it work better if the husband had someone to hold him accountable to growing and being a better person, rather than having a wife who acts as a slave to cater to his every whim, who creates a selfish monster? I want to understand what you say about marriage. Have we twisted your words and what you meant about how to have a good marriage? I believe that it has been made into an idol, and so many lives are sacrificed on that idol.
Wow. Elizabeth, can I interject for a minute? I just want to, those are like $1 million questions for God.
Yeah.
And I hear the heart behind it of tenderness, of brokenness, of hunger and beautiful desire for what's right and good and true and for freedom. And I'm like finding myself thinking of people in my life who I know and deeply love, who need those answers too. And I find myself being like, oh, these are the money questions. So keep going.
Right. So it was after my divorce, because God literally rescued me from that marriage. It's unbelievable. Whole nother story. So many
God.
people telling me, like, from my home church, like, you can't get divorced. You just have to love them. And I was like, they're like, you need to listen to God, not people. And I was like, I am listening to God. I'm listening to God. And so, anyway, I was writing my prayer journal. I kept asking God, please show me truth. And he did it over and over and over. And he made it very clear to me that he did not expect me to stay. And so I had just built a house with my ex-husband. We just finished it. He worked in the oil field, so he was gone 16 days and home for 12. And I'm home homeschooling with 6 kids and building this house. We did it ourselves, and there was a lot of times that things had to get done and there was nobody there to do it except for my kids and I. And so I learned how to run a backhoe. I dug out our basement. I put in our septic system. I did all kinds of stuff. And so I feel like God was using that experience to prepare me for building my own house, because I never would have dreamed taking something like that on. It's crazy to think that as a single mom, you could build your own house.
Now that's when I met you. That's when I saw you on
yes,
Facebook. And
yes.
I
And
remember you were climbing on, up on the beams and, doing all kinds of things. And then this other guy comes into your life, and that's when we picked up our story together. I remember watching that happen. Yeah.
You sent me a friend request, and this is when I'm still seeking truth. And I had just heard your podcast, or you interviewed on Natalie Hoffman's podcast, Flying Free. And I was like, that's really interesting. And I was still really wrestling and struggling with what I'd always believed, but then trying to find the truth. And it's so entrenched in the church that this is the way it has to be. That God created men to be leaders and women just have to follow. At least in my experience, it feels like it's everywhere and everyone believes it. And if you question that, you're a heretic, which I'm like, okay, I'll be a heretic. That's fine. But anyway, so I listened to your interview, and then you sent me a friend request, I think right around that time. And then I kind of sent you my story, and you took the time to read it. And so I was really touched by that. And then I started listening to your podcast. And at first I was like, this seems heretical. And no offense, but when I was grown up in all of this stuff and it was so entrenched in me, I was like, I don't know about this. I don't know, but it really captured my attention. And I thought, this is stuff I've been wrestling with and questioning anyway. So I started listening. I think I listened to your entire podcast. I think I probably heard almost every episode. But
wow, and that is how many seasons, Dad?
A lot.
We're now on season 12. We're on, yeah. Well, let me just explain to those who don't know. The first 4 seasons have the basic teaching. So season 1, we spend 8 episodes going through the Garden of Eden. And then season 2, we're talking about how we go beyond Eden with the Holy Spirit comes into us as believers in the New Testament. And that's based on Ephesians 5 and 6, which has been twisted to actually go against a lot of the things that we think should be in there. And then season 3 is on 1 Timothy 2 and 3. Whether or not women can be active in ministry is a big deal in 1 Timothy chapter 2 and into 3. And then season 4 is on 1 Corinthians 11 and 14. And also on 1 Peter 3. So in those first 4 seasons, you get the basic teaching we want you to understand. And then people came to me and they said, what if we don't learn through listening? What if we learn through reading? So we put it into books. So I can hold this one up. It's called, what do you call a book on Genesis 2 and 3? We call it the Book of Eden. And this turned into a course, and then it turned into workshops. So we're just trying to provide this basic Bible teaching as best we can in all formats. And it depends on your learning style, what you can do. So you obviously, hopefully, were a good listener. You were able to pick it up through the podcast.
I love to read, but I've been so busy, building a house, having all these kids. I was working as a nurse during COVID. It's been, so I haven't had time to sit and read. So I listen all the time when I'm working on projects, when I was building, all this stuff, I'm just listening to all this information because I want to learn and I want to understand what the truth is. And then just going through all of just a lot of horrific things and situations with really unhealthy people. I've been really almost become obsessed, not quite, but almost, with learning about what God's truth is and just learning about I always joke that I have an informal degree in psychology because I have listened to piles and piles and piles of books and materials and podcasts, just trying to understand what the truth is. And then I also am just really passionate about helping other people, especially women, understand God values women so much. And he did not intend for us to be limited. And I believe that the scripture has been twisted in order to limit women. And I want to be a voice, because if my mother would have had a voice, if she would have had somebody tell her something different, I wonder, she passed away 7 years ago from cancer, but I just wonder if her life would have been completely different, and if our lives would have been different.
You know, Elizabeth, yeah, I am sorry to hear that about your mother. And I can only imagine what life could have been like differently with an accurate message. I noticed the theme. I noticed something you said about your story that shifted somewhere along the way in your life. You shifted from asking God in your prayers. You talked about your earlier on prayer journals in your first marriage of like, God, fix my marriage. In your second marriage too, God, fix my marriage. But somewhere along the way, your prayers shifted from God, fix it, to God, show me the truth. Right. And I think that's really interesting that I see like there's been this insatiable hunger in your walk in the more recent years. And as you've journeyed into healthier and healthier contexts and internal landscape of your soul becoming healthier and healthier, it seems to me, would you say this is accurate? It has come as you have found the truth and been seeking the truth. So it's not been like God's just stepped in and moved all the pieces on the chess game for you, but he's shown you the truth so that you can make the healthier moves that you need to make. And I think that's really beautiful and something to highlight. And you also mentioned you're really passionate. So as we're coming to the end of this episode, you said you're really passionate about helping, especially other women, end the cycle of abuse in their lives and find the truth. What would you say? Here's my zinger question for you. What message would you give? Picture one person, listening in on this episode with us who feels like they're immediately identifying areas of their life where they're not living in that kind of freedom, where it might be abuse, it just might be unhealthy boundaries, but there's something in this message for them. What would be your word of encouragement to them?
I think I would encourage, it's okay to question God. It's okay. Jacob wrestled with God. He does not get upset or offended if we question. I think he actually encourages us to question so that we can really know him. Because we don't know the truth if we just are believing what someone else has told us is the truth. And I think if we really seek for it, and I love my Bible and I listen to it in different versions now, just so I can get different context, but I'm amazed all the time at all the new things that pop up where I'm like, wow, I totally used to think something totally different, but now God's showing me something completely the opposite now. And I think I would just encourage people, if they have questions, to really search for themselves.
Well, we've been listening to Elizabeth Heger today, and there's so much more to your story. We can't wait till your book comes out. I watched you build that second house all by yourself, and right. We're interested in all the kids, all that's going on. So we're appreciating the Facebook and other ways we can keep in touch. So we will thank you for this episode, and we'll be listening and paying attention in the future. Thank you so much. Okay. All right.
Yeah, you're welcome. Very nice to talk to you guys today.
All right. Bye-bye.
And thank you for everything. It changed my life. So thank you.
True 316 Foundation is the home of the Eden podcast. Join us for $3.16 a month or more. Let's true the verses on the key passages on women and men. Go to true316.com/partner. True 316 is strengthening and encouraging many, and we're getting stories every day of lives changed through our ministry. We're the home of the Eden podcast, and we're getting the word out that God didn't curse Eve or Adam or limit woman in any way. Our volunteer help is wonderful, and we grow stronger with each new true partner who gives to the True 316 Foundation so that we can cover the costs to do the technical work of the Eden podcast, to coordinate our True School workshops like the 2-week Eden workshop on Genesis 2 and 3, and to make the True 316 Foundation function in its outreach to scholars and students around the world. You can give now with a one-time gift. And better still, you can join now and become a monthly donor. We call our monthly donors our true partners. Please join now by going to true316.com/partner.